Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Pleasure Points podcast. I'm your host, James Rohr. Super excited to have you here. Today's episode is an interesting one. So, today I want to break down an experience that I had in a meditation. And if you've been checking out some of these other podcasts that I've been doing, you know that I talk a lot about meditation. Well, really mindfulness, just like paying the fuck attention to your life, right? So that we can try to all not be so awful. And sometimes like some weird shit can happen. Those things can get a little weird. And so this is just one of those stories, something that happened to me. And, you know, I don't like to make huge conclusions about stuff. We're just spitballing and talking about different ideas here. So this was one that came to mind that I wanted to share with you guys. Let me know what you think. As always, I am so stoked that you're here, and welcome to the show. Wanted to talk a little bit about meditation. Actually, it's not really meditation. It's more about kind of a way of being. But the story that I'm going to share with you happened during a type of a meditation. You know, and it's, as I think about it, it reminds me of, you know, when I've had clients over the years come in and say that they started meditating, my favorite question to ask them is why. And sometimes they kind of look at me strangely as if that's like such a bizarre question. Well, we should be meditating. You know, meditation is good for me, right? And, you know, it's a reasonable stance, I suppose. But being reasonable never really gets people that far. You know, and they say, well, you know, I'm doing it because I need to do it, or I should do it, or it's good to, you know, quiet my mind. Yeah, okay, maybe that's the case. But, you know, it sort of reminds me of how I grew up, like growing up in a Catholic household. And, you know, you go to church for like an hour a week, maybe. As I got older, it got less and less and less, you know, maybe 4 times a year. And then the rest of the time, what? Are you off the hook? You know, does going to church for 1 week, like, fix anything? Save your soul? You know, if somebody's an asshole for the 6.5 days a week and then they go to church and they repent and take communion and whatever, like, are they absolved of everything? And if they keep doing that over and over and over again? I knew this guy in college who was pretty Catholic, and he was, like, having sex with all sorts of different women. And I was like, dude, how do you reconcile that? And he's like, well, you know, I apologize afterwards, and that makes it all okay. And, you know, and then when I die, when I'm old, like on my deathbed, I get to, you know, repent and everything's forgiven. That's like 19-year-old logic. You know, whatever, right? So I like to ask people why they're meditating. And the point there is that if you're meditating to have like 5 minutes of quiet, you know, or you're connected to something, or you still the mind, and then you have the energy then to resume the hectic life and the chaotic lifestyle. Maybe the premise of sitting in meditation is worth reevaluating. Because if what we're doing is just scrambling to have enough energy, to have enough vitality, to resume the chaos, well, I'm not so sure that that's really going to be all that sustainable. Might be missing the point. Yeah. So I don't know who said it, the Dalai Lama or, you know, Thich Nhat Hanh or somebody. I've heard it in a bunch of different places since then. But, you know, really making your life your meditation. Bringing whatever that intention is while you're sitting in meditation and making that the moment-to-moment purpose. Show up all that way in your life. You know, maybe you don't even need to sit still or with the lights off or focusing on a candle. Maybe if you pay attention while you're doing the dishes. Maybe if we pay attention while we're placing one foot in front of the other. Maybe if we can become more aware of the moment-to-moment choices that we make of what to believe and what stories to feed. Maybe that's a better commitment. Maybe that's more likely to get you the outcome. But that also means that we have to be willing to let go of the chaos. We have to be willing to let go of some of the bullshit. And that gets to the story that I wanted to share with you. So I used to, I haven't done it in a while. I haven't seen this guy in quite some time. But shortly after, when I graduated acupuncture school, I was living back home in the Chicago suburbs. And one of my old friends suggested that we get together and we do like some ceremony together. Yeah, in this case, the ceremony looked like kind of seated energy work. So we would get together and I'd set up the massage table and, we'd be intentional. We would talk about, what the purpose is. If one of us was struggling with something, what we wanted to learn or to discover or to journey and to see. And it was kind of a cool setup because we would take some time in prayer and intention ahead of time. And then whoever's turn it was would lay on the table. And the other person would really just kind of sit in the room and observe. We would, the popular phrase of like hold the space, right? So we'd hold this space. We would just kind of be in the intention of the room and in that energy. And the person laying on the table, we'd put like a cloth over our eyes or whatever, to kind of black it out even more, and just become extra aware of what the sensations were. Maybe there would be visions, maybe there would be feelings, maybe there would be, whatever, colors, smells, all sorts of stuff can happen. And then the other person would just sit in the room and kind of consciously remind them of the intention that we set beforehand. There were no drugs involved. There was no hallucinogens. Like there was nothing. It was just a couple of people coming together with intention and prayer and, just seeing what would happen. And so, there are a lot of different stories that happened from these healing sessions that we did. But the one that I want to talk about now was this moment where I was laying on the table and my buddy was, in charge of sort of holding space in the room. And at one point I felt as though like I was on the surface of the water, and this thing like reached up and grabbed me, and I felt as though I was being submerged underwater. And as I was going down and going under, eventually, there was this calm, right? Because I could still breathe, but I was very much felt like I was descending into these darker depths of the water. And we finally, hit the bottom, and there was like this kind of illumination of light. And I saw this, I don't know, this energy coming toward me, some kind of like apparition or whatever. It sort of looked like Poseidon, but this is the experience that I had. So this energy, it was almost like Poseidon came in, and he started talking to me, and he said, he was like, "Hey, it's nice to see you here." And I said, "Well, okay, cool, thanks." What did he say to like this like Poseidon like figure? I was like, I don't know, I thought I was in my basement, and now I'm apparently underwater and communing with some kind of underwater thing. And he said, do you like what's been going on in your life? And I said, yeah. And then he was like, we wanted you to do this healing work years ago, but you said you needed to go to school to learn more. So you went to Stanford, and now you finished acupuncture school. He said, are you finally ready to get to fucking work? And I said, yeah. And he said, good. You got to forget everything you were taught. And I just looked at him and I was just like, oh my God. Right. I was like $100,000 in debt from all this education. And I couldn't have been more than like 6 months, maybe a year into my new practice, probably not even that long. And just trying to scramble to see if like this acupuncture shit was even working. And he's telling me now I've got to forget everything that I've been taught. And then he looks at me and he says, we've been good to you, right? Like, we've been good. And I was like, yeah, you have. I mean, I'm shitting blood like, 10 times a day. My gut's all fucked up. A little help there would be nice. And he's like, yeah, don't be concerned about that right now. Right. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck? Easier said than done. I'm the one who's running to the bathroom afraid of like, you shitting in the hallway, not making it to bathrooms on time and all this stuff. But he's like, what are you doing? It's Poseidon. So he's like, don't worry about that right now. And he's like, but you like all this stuff, right? Like, your kind of ghost experiences and energy and all this shit. And I was like, yeah, it's cool. And he's like, yeah. He said, all that good stuff that's happened to you, he goes, you got to forget about that too. And I was like, what? And he's like, the work that we need you to do is going to require you to be absolutely present. And if you're attached to stories, even the good stories, then you're not going to be able to do what we need you to do. And with that, I mean, my stomach dropped, right? I was just like, oh, fuck. And then, it was like whatever was keeping me down there let go, and I, returned to the surface and quickly found myself back on the table. And, my buddy ends up, and he felt like it was time, he wraps it up. And before, we would do like the debrief afterwards. And my buddy went first this time, and he said, he goes, I don't know what happened. He goes, I was there with you. He's like, I was, in the room here. And he goes, the next thing I know, it felt like we were underwater, like deep underwater. And he was like, and then it just felt like there was like some presence that was like huge. And he goes, and that was all I could tell. That was all I could feel, And I was like, flabbergasted by that. We would have a similar kind of mutual vibe on the thing. And so, I was just like, holy shit, this idea of kind of becoming completely unattached is something that I've been thinking about and working with and trying to, run these different experiments for the last 15 years about taking a look at, what is it that we cling to, and continuing to, obviously there's a lot of energy people want to let go of the bad stuff, which is like a separate topic altogether. But this idea of letting go of the good stuff too, in order to be really present, by either, constantly referencing the stories of the past. And I get the irony, right, of this lesson coming from as I'm telling you a story. But what the fuck, we're humans. We have these stories. But the point there, I think, is for us to not be defined by that, and to not scramble to get back to a particular vibration. I remember I used to, in my very early years of practice, I used to treat this guy whose purpose of coming in to see me was because he said he used to be a good meditator, and he used to have all these amazing things happen to him when he was meditating, and he wanted to get back to it. And he was plagued because he was trying to get back to a particular vibration that he had experienced years ago. And no matter what kind of, what I said to him or suggestions or any of that stuff, he was unwilling to run a different experiment. So he kept living, every time going into meditation, trying to attain a state that had happened earlier. And I watched him as months and years went by wasted. Not wasted, I mean, it was his experience, but I could just see, the turmoil that he had of trying to get back to an earlier state of being, and the dangers of that, even when that earlier state of being is so good, right? That's almost the most dangerous part. And I've seen it in years since then with people with fame or athletic achievement, whatever it is, trying to get back to an old state. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. So we can hold on, we can share stories as a story. It's just like, fuck, it happened, right? But I was reminded of this again when years later, I was seeing a healer that, has worked on me for, lots of times. And I went to her place, and she had started getting into this thing called rapé. I think that's how it's pronounced. I don't know. It's some fucking Brazilian bark from the jungle. And I thought she was going to give me acupuncture. And instead she says, we've got to do this. I got to do this thing. I've been using it, and it helps to decalcify the third eye and, open up your fucking shit and whatever. And I was like, whatever. I trusted her, and I'm down to try things out. And so, it's just like this bark, this powder, and there's different formulations from what I've come to understand. And she comes over, and at first she's like, she goes, I'm going to do this repair. I got to go get it. So she goes like downstairs. I'm being treated in her house. She goes downstairs, And then she comes back up and she's like, okay, we're going to do it now. And I was like, all right, like, what does this look like? And she goes, well, I'm going to blow this stuff into your nose. Now, I've never done any, like, I've never snorted anything. Closest thing that I've come is like one of those like nasal decongestant sprays, right? Or like a xylitol spray. And she's like, okay, here we go. Not giving me like any time to fucking recalibrate. And she blows this fucking bark up into my nose. And it burns and it stings. And it's like someone dropped what I would imagine like battery acid, like right between my eyes. Oh, fuck, it was horrible. And I start watering. I'm feeling coughing and I'm feeling like this, like immediate, this wave of nausea. And then there's all this like phlegm. She's like, you got to swallow the phlegm. And I was like, oh, fuck, but I do what I'm told, right? So I swallow the phlegm. And I feel like, just super sick. Then she goes, okay, we got to do the other side. And I was like, oh, fuck me. So then she fills up the shit again and she puts it and she blows it in the other side. And at this point, I immediately get hot. I break out into a full sweat and I feel like I'm gonna retch. And so I run to the bathroom and I just start vomiting all this like shit, this like layer of like mucus, and I was so fucking gross. And as I'm sitting there, like, I'm sweating, I'm chills. I don't know if I'm going to, like, have diarrhea also. And I'm just, like, huddling over this toilet bowl. And I was reminded of that experience. I was reminded of that meditation of being under the water. Because as I was vomiting, I felt empty. For a moment, I couldn't even, it was later that I made the connection with that meditation under the water. Because as I was vomiting and I'm watching this sort of like these layers of phlegm and just grossness come out of me, I felt so empty. And I remember there and I was just like, oh my God, this is what it's like to be a man without a story. And I get that as soon as we kind of put words to something, it's creating a story. But, how close can we get to this stuff? I don't know. But as I was laying there, just in that physical discomfort and this cleansing and purging, and my third eye feels like it's, still fucking being lit up by battery acid, I was like, oh my God, this must be what it's like to like have amnesia, to wake up and have no idea kind of who you are or what you are or where you've come from or what your dreams are, what your dreams have been, what accomplishments you've had, what failures you've had. It's just there. It was all there in this moment where it was like there was no story. And I don't know. I don't know shit. So this was like an experience that I had. And then later it reminded me of that time under the water where the guy was like, you have to let go of the good shit too. Because in even holding on to the good stuff, what I've come to sort of, I think, maybe realize is that there's this attachment that can happen. This attachment even to the good stuff, or I'm someone who sees energy, or I'm somebody who did this, or I'm somebody who sensed that, or I'm this, I'm that. And it's just all this attachment. And the peril, it seems to be, of this kind of attachment is that when it's backed up with a profound belief, there can become all sorts of energy to protect it, to recreate it, to get back to it, to nurture it, to stick up for it. These are, I don't know, just things that, some of the teachers that I've had have suggested. And that from a place of properly letting go or being unattached, of stepping away some of this identification, that maybe there's a deeper realization that can become possible. So I don't know. It's like, I think about it because these experiences have been they've shaken me, right? I've been shook by some of these things. And I sit and I contemplate sometimes, what is the cost of chasing, and clinging to identity. And so, just a 5-minute meditation of sitting in silence to quiet the mind and then to go right back and clinging to an identity seems to miss the mark. And so maybe this week we can all run an experiment of not being attached to even the good stuff that's happened, but to commit to being present in the moment at all times, observing, rejoicing, taking pleasure in whatever is unfolding, knowing that if it's difficult, it'll pass. The pain, the discomfort, all of that stuff will shift. And that maybe there's more to us than just the stuff that we think that we are. Maybe there's more to us than just the pain or the joys, the accomplishments, the business deals, whatever. Maybe there's more to us than just the identity. And maybe the way to discover that moreness is to actually drop the identity. That in the letting go, in the discarding of the good stuff, we actually realize how much more we are. So that's what I've got for you this week. Hopefully you enjoyed the story. Let me know what you think. If you had any experiences like this where, you found that in letting go, even of the good shit, that more connection, more energy, more vitality has opened up for you. What is holding on to some identities, trying to stick up for yourself or prove that you are a particular way to people? What does that cost you? Is that draining your vitality? Is that draining your energy? Is that draining your life force? Let's have that discussion. Keep that going. Thank you so much, as always, for being here, and I will catch you next time.